What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions mock draft. Today, we're doing a post-free agency mock draft. Of course, free agency isn't officially over. We still have over a month to go until the NFL draft. And up until that point, and even through the draft, the Detroit Lions could sign free agents. They could trade for players. They could cut players. And they could do a lot of different things to adjust this roster. But with all of the big names off the board, with everything kind of settling down a little bit on the free agency front, it's time to look towards the draft. There are 6 weeks until the Detroit Lions are on the clock in April at Green Bay. And today we're going to take a look at a strategy they may take to improve this roster and keep it at a Super Bowl caliber level. Now, going into the NFL draft, there are lots of things the Lions could do. They could trade away the pick. They could keep the pick. They could trade for a player. They could trade up. They could trade back. There's lots of options that they could do. But to start this draft, there was a really good opportunity for the Detroit Lions to trade their pick away and potentially acquire a lot of draft capital over the day 2 selections in the draft. So I ended up taking it. And not only did I take one trade, I ended up trading twice on day 1 of the NFL draft with both the Bills and the 49ers. Now, the Buffalo Bills offered the 28th pick and the 102nd pick in exchange for pick 30 and 62. The Detroit Lions would get 2 picks, one at the very end of day 1 and one at the very end of day 2, but essentially just adding a second round pick for a very, very minuscule trade back to only give up 2 spots in the class. And once we were at 30, the 49ers called. They wanted the 30th overall pick and were willing to offer pick 43. So the Lions fall back about 13 spots in the draft, but they pick up pick number 75, a middling 3rd round selection that could go a long way towards getting one of those depth defensive linemen and filling out the roster even further than it already was. So a double trade on day 1, the Detroit Lions do pretty much exactly what the Buffalo Bills did a year ago, where they were, at pick, I believe 26, they traded back with Kansas City, then they traded back again with Carolina, and they ended up picking really early on day 2, but traded away 2 of their first round picks in the same draft class. So the Lions, following a very similar pattern to the Bills of last season, and start off day 2 with pick 43. I have the Detroit Lions selecting Landon Jackson, the 6'6", 260-pound edge rusher from the University of Arkansas. With 13 sacks in his last 2 seasons and 28 TFLs, 5 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery, Landon Jackson fits exactly what the Detroit Lions like. A first-team All-SEC defensive lineman in 2023 and a second-team All-SEC defensive lineman in 2024. He is big at 6'6", 260 pounds, and actually put on 40 pounds of muscle at the University of Arkansas in his final season. Going from his junior to his senior year, he put on 40 pounds to his frame and could potentially even add a little bit more going into the NFL. And not only is he big and fairly productive in the SEC, but this kid is athletic. With an overall RAS score of 9.95, a 40.5-inch vertical, a 10'9" broad jump, and running a 4.68 40-yard dash, this is the exact kind of player the Lions like to have. Big, fast, athletic, with a really good motor, and he's got some really good traits, right? He's big, he's powerful, he's a good run defender, he's a good pass rusher. As I said, added 40 pounds at Arkansas, so showed the ability to up that weight and up the strength a little bit, and he has inside-outside versatility. He rushed from all 4 positions along the defensive line, from the left end to the right end and everything in between. He is versatile. He can basically stay on the field for every single down. And even though his numbers aren't going to wow you, I think that's the biggest reason as to why he's going in the second round is he never topped 6.5 sacks in a season. But if he can come to Detroit, be healthy, and give the Detroit Lions 6.5, 7 sacks on the year consistently, I think that's worth a second round pick. If he can grow a little bit, be a good run defender, and just overall be healthy on the field and be productive as he was at Arkansas, I see no reason not to spend a second round pick on a player that has the floor that he has, with the potential upside to grow even further throughout his NFL draft journey. Now, going on to pick 60, I stayed with the defensive line, selecting TJ Sanders, the 6'5", 300-pound defensive tackle from South Carolina. 8.5 sacks in the last 3 years, 17 tackles for loss since 2023. He is one of the most underrated defensive linemen in this class. There's a lot of good ones, and a lot of the value for defensive tackle comes on day 2 of the draft. It comes from, the second-round players, because those are the guys that I think you're going to get the best value out of, and TJ Sanders is no exception to that. With an 8.53 overall RAS score, he didn't run the 40-yard dash, but graded out with great explosiveness with a 31.5-inch vertical and a 9-foot 4-inch broad jump, again, at 6'5", 300 pounds. He has good leverage, good power. He's very violent with his hands and very violent at the point of attack. He sheds blocks really well. He's a good run defender. He isn't the bendiest player. He's not the most versatile player. He's not going to be like a Levi Onwuzurike that can move to the edge, but for a guy that just is really good, very violent, very disruptive in the middle, he could be a player that immediately replaces Aleem McNeil for the time that he misses, and then immediately replaces DJ Reader next year if he does leave in the free agency market. This is more of a future-proofing move as well as kind of an immediate Band-Aid move for the Aleem McNeil return timeline. But I think overall, TJ Sanders could have a pretty good impact his rookie year and really take a step up in his sophomore season to, kind of take on a larger role, again, when DJ Reader inevitably leaves or retires from the Detroit Lions next season. Moving a little bit further, on to pick 62. I have the Detroit Lions selecting Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher from Ohio State. This feels like a Detroit Lion to me, right? He is a senior player who went back to Ohio State to win a national championship. That kind of mindset and attitude screams Detroit Lions grit to me. Not to mention they met with Jack Sawyer. He was one of their first combine invites for an interview. They've talked with him, they've met with him, and they very clearly have interest in the Ohio State product. After a fantastic playoff run that saw him get 4 sacks and 6 passes defended, as well as a forced fumble, scoop, and score to send them to the national championship, Jack Sawyer's draft stock has been on the rise. At 6'4", 240 pounds, he has 23 career sacks, 29 career TFLs, 6 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, and 11 passes defended. Now, he's not quite as big as Landon Jackson, but I do think he's a little bit bendier. I think he's a little bit more athletic as far as being a true edge rusher. And I think that he could be good for the Detroit Lions. He doesn't have the versatility to move inside and outside because of that lack of size, but if you pair him and Landon Jackson on one side, you let them rotate, you let them each get opportunities alongside Aiden Hutchinson, I think as a duo, they could put together 12, 13 sacks on the season as a, rounds 2 and 2 edge rushers. I think that's good value, right? And then you have good depth. If one of them goes down, you still have another solid option. It essentially makes Marcus Davenport your edge rusher 4, and it gives you 2 really solid options to rotate between, and 2 guys that I think aren't going to be superstars in the NFL, right? They're not going to be all pro caliber players, but in the second round, you might not get that, right? I know Brian Branch and Sam Laporta made it look easy to be all pros out of the second round, but truly, if you go out of round 2 with 3 really good defensive linemen, just shoring up the depth, shoring up a couple of starting positions, I'm not sure how many people could be really mad at the rotation and mad at the opportunity the Detroit Lions have to really shore up their defensive line and address it as strongly as possible on day 2 of the NFL draft. Now, we're not done in day 2, as we do have pick 75 as well, and I'm trading it away again because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers called and they wanted the 75th overall pick. In exchange, they were willing to give up pick 84, so you drop 9 spots in the draft, but you also pick up a day 3 pick with pick 121. There was a couple of players in that range that I really liked for the Lions, and I didn't want to go off the board. So the Lions drop back 9 spots, and this is where I think they address the secondary. They move away from the defensive line, but stay on the defense, and select Iowa's Sebastian Castro with the 84th overall selection. The 5'11", 204-pound safety was fantastic in 2023 with 67 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 interceptions, and 8 passes defended. He was looked at as a potential first-round pick going into the 2024 college football season. Now, he took a step back in 2024. 57 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1 interception, 1 passes defended, and 2 forced fumbles. He was good. He was okay for the Iowa secondary, and it felt like this year he was tested a lot less, and at least certainly a lot less so than he was in 2023. But the lack of production and the step back from the production side is a little bit of a concern, which is why I think he falls into the 3rd round. Now, Castro is a physical defensive back. He has great eyes, great instincts, sees plays developing really well, and sees route development in a very rare way that very few players see the way that Castro does. He's aggressive downhill. He's a punishing hitter. He is a willing tackler. He's not a great athlete, right? 4.48 RAS score, 4.59 40-yard dash, 30.5-inch vert, 9'9" broad jump. He doesn't really have elite NFL range, but if you leave him in the box, you let him go make plays, let him play, kind of the Ifeatu Melifonwu role where you keep him around the line of scrimmage, you let him be an athlete, you blitz him, you let him play against the run. Occasionally, you drop him back into coverage. You kind of protect him from that deep safety role, but you can because Kirby Joseph is an all-pro at that position, and Brian Branch is fantastic as well there. So you don't need a deep middle fielding free safety because that's what Kirby Joseph does really well. You need a box safety. You need a punishing player. You need a guy that players aren't going to want to hit in the box. And Sebastian Castro can be that player, be a great safety 3 for the Lions, be a cheaper replacement for Ifeatu Melifonwu, and really add some depth to this secondary that they have sorely been missing. Really, in the absence of Melifonwu last year, they weren't able to play their 3 safety sets and are now currently missing with him shipping off to the Miami Dolphins. Moving on to day 3 of the NFL draft, at pick 121, this is the most Brad Holmes signing and the most Brad Holmes selection I think there is in the draft, and that's Jackson Slater, a 6'4", 316-pound guard from Sacramento State, playing 1,383 pass blocking snaps over his 3-season career. He allowed just 2 sacks and 4 quarterback hits. Now, he is exclusively a left guard, which is fine because Christian Mahogany plays his best football at right guard. And even though he may not start immediately on day 1, I think he can push Graham Glasgow for a starting position. And if not, can sit for a year, can develop, and really potentially take on that role in 2026 when Graham Glasgow either retires or contract expires. Now, the biggest concern, of course, is the small school player. There's going to be a lot of people that are upset that it's not a Georgia, that it's not a Michigan, that it's not an Ohio State player. But he did play a number of Division I FBS programs. I believe he played San Jose State, played Fresno State, and was really good in those matchups as well. Those, of course, are still smaller schools, but they are bigger than what his conference standings would allow. He is coming off of a little bit of an injury, only played 9 games in his final season at Sacramento State, but in those 9 games, he was perfect, didn't allow a sack, didn't allow a quarterback hit, and has been fantastic throughout his NFL career. Every single year, Brad Holmes takes a small school offensive lineman. Right, 2 years ago, it was Colby Sorsdale from William & Mary. Last season, it was Giovanni Manu from British Columbia. This season, it's Jackson Slater from Sacramento State. Everybody's going to be upset about it. Everybody's going to feel like it should be a corner. Everyone's going to feel like it should be this player or that player or, an impact flashy guy. But Brad Holmes is going to take an offensive lineman from a small school. This year, it's Jackson Slater. I think it's a good pick, quite honestly. Moving on, just 9 picks lower, I think the Detroit Lions finally go to a flashier player, that being Luke Lockheed, 6'6" tight end from Iowa, standing at 248 pounds. In his career, 74 receptions, 893 yards, and 4 touchdowns. But all 4 of those touchdowns came from him as a sophomore, right? He hasn't scored in the last 2 seasons for Iowa, and part of that really isn't his fault, right? Look at the quarterbacks that were throwing to him. Look at the offensive numbers that Iowa's put together. They're not very good, right? Iowa isn't known for being a high-flying offense, and it's tough to statistically succeed there. And there have been great tight ends out of Iowa that haven't been super great, right? George Kittle didn't have a great statistical career at Iowa. Noah Fant didn't have a great statistical career at Iowa. And even TJ Hawkinson and Sam Laporta seemed like they were underwhelming statistically because of the passing offense that was put in place. I don't think that's very telling of how talented Lockley can be. And I think that if the Detroit Lions can add a second Iowa tight end to this offense, a good receiver with great range, really good hands. I mean, he's got length. He's got an incredible catch radius, and every throw sticks to his hands like glue. I think this is a good option. I think this is a potentially really good player for the Lions in the 5th round, and it adds a little bit of firepower to the offense while still giving you a potential weapon in the blocking game as well. Moving down to 37 picks from there, the Lions go back to defense, and I think they addressed it at linebacker with Jack Kaiser, the 6'1", 227-pound linebacker. Last season for the Fighting Irish, taking them all the way to the national championship. He totaled 90 tackles, 5 TFLs, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. The senior captain at linebacker is a leader. He is a strong tackler. He's pretty good in coverage. Even though he won't start at all for the Lions, likely even in his career potentially, I think he'd be a really good backup. I think he'd be a really good special teamer. And at this point on day 3 in the NFL draft, if you can get a quality special teamer, if you can get a quality tackler, if you can get a leader on the special teams to potentially be a long-term replacement for Jalen Reeves-Maybin, I think you take it. You take the opportunity, you run with it, and you just really kind of live with the fact that you're getting more value out of day 3 than a lot of teams and a lot of players are going to be. At pick 228, I think the Lions go back to offensive line, selecting Jacob Gideon, the 6'2", 290-pound offensive center from Western Michigan. They stay within the state with a small school guy who's back-to-back first-team All-MAC at the center position. In 3 of the last 4 seasons, Western Michigan has had a 1,000-yard rusher, largely due to the run blocking of the offensive line there and largely due to Jacob Gideon's production and performances. He's a fantastic small school player. Again, isn't going to start over Frank Ragnow, obviously, but could add some quality depth, just adds to the offensive line, adds to, the depth that the Lions have on offense. And if he never plays, he never plays. It's the pick 228, right? This is a guy that isn't expected to be a superstar, but I think in a worst case scenario, adds some quality depth and is a good player for the Lions to potentially add and even just bring around as a practice squad player as well. And then at the end of the draft, I have the Detroit Lions selecting Patrick Jenkins, the defensive tackle from Tulane. Not a lot to say here. Again, a 7th-round selection, 6'2", 293 pounds, 13 career sacks, 28 TFLs, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. I think he's a good explosive pass rusher. He's not the biggest, not the fastest, not the strongest, but could be a fun rotational guy, could be a preseason body, could be a practice squad stash. I think has a little bit of upside being just a junior at Tulane and putting up 6 sacks a season ago in the American Conference. So with that being said, that is my mock draft. It has a lot of players. I believe there are 9 players in this class, but I think each and every one of them has the potential to start and be really, really good. I like Landon Jackson to potentially be a starter. Pairing him with Jack Sawyer, I think could be a really good option. JJ Sanders is a phenomenal defensive tackle from South Carolina that, again, can play while Aleem is injured, rotate when Aleem is healthy, and take over when DJ Reader leaves the team. I think that, Sebastian Castro is going to be a good safety 3. Jackson Slater could potentially be a eventual starter on the offensive line post Graham Glasgow. Luke Lockey is going to be a good option in the receiving game. Jack Kaiser is going to be a great special teams addition. Jacob Gideon's a good backup, as is Patrick Jenkins. Not a lot of starters, not a lot of star power, but the Lions don't need it. And really, it doesn't matter who they take in this class. There aren't going to be a lot of starters from this draft class because the Lions are so talented. This free agency, this draft class is all about adding depth, and that's what this draft class does. That's what the free agency has done, and I think that's the route that Brad Holmes will take this offseason. So with that being said, let me know down in the comments below how you feel about this mock draft. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are there players you really like, players you really don't like? I'm curious to hear what you guys think and have to say. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.